Good afternoon, everyone. So my presentation is regarding on COVID and the construction companies. And in this regard, I'll present you the importance of practicing enterprise risk management in construction companies during such unanticipated events. So this paper is part of my PhD study. That is concerning on the practice of Ethiopian domestic contractors in managing risks. So my presentation will have four parts. The first is introduction, and I'll see the impact of COVID on construction companies and the global economy. And the third part, I'll see the need for practicing enterprise risk management. And finally, I'll conclude with few brief points. As an introduction, it's good to see what COVID is regarding the construction industry and even the global socio-economic issues. So COVID is obviously an anticipated event for the globe, and it has also significant socio-economic impacts. And reports have been showing that it is the biggest danger since the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. And it is the first economic recession to have been triggered solely by the pandemic during the past 15 years. Obviously, construction industry is impacted by various challenges and risks, and this COVID is an additional burden for the sector. And to see the enterprise risk management, it's good if we see what risk is. Risk is defined in terms of the two terms, probability and impact. So we can say risk is the probability of occurrence and its impact on objective sets. So we have two parameters, impact and the probability, and risk is calculated by multiplying probability and impact. The impact probability matrix could also give us the different dimensions of the risk magnitude from the low risk to the high risk. In the case that the probability and impact of an event is very low, we can say that this risk has low significant or low magnitude. But when the probability of occurrence and the impact is growing, the magnitude of the risk will increase, and finally, at the highest probability and highest impact scenario, we'll have high and catastrophic risks. In this case, what is expected from risk managers is to focus on the red ones and to protect the yellow one and to oversee the low risk events. It's also good if we see what risk is. Is really risk always destructive? This is an important question to be created. A recent approach on risk is that risk is not always destructive, but it would have two phases. So risk is classified as positive risk and negative risk. The negative one is what we call it a threat, and the positive one is the opportunity. And this is always important for contractors, especially because in the case that there is an opportunity, they are supposed to optimize their opportunity, and there are risks, they are expected to mitigate their risks. So if there is a risk, there should also be a system or a framework that would help to handle risks. And recently, what is being promoted is the enterprise risk management, which is a holistic one and an integrated one. And the current and the recently developed definition of enterprise risk management is that enterprise risk management is the cultures, capabilities, and practices integrated with strategy settings and performance that organizations are supposed to create, preserve, and realize values. The problem again is enterprise risk management, despite its various benefits, is less understood in practice in the construction industry. Now, we have COVID. We consider it is a catastrophic event, but Einstein says that in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. So it would be good for the construction practitioners to see COVID as an opportunity as well, because being this catastrophic and the globe is even facing various problems, we are supposed to establish effective and efficient systems to handle risks or unanticipated events. So it would help construction companies to examine their capability and readiness to manage their risks again. Subsequently, uh, they would help them to establish an appropriate risk management system in their firm. A good example in this regard is the financial institutes. These institutes have been benefiting huge, uh, hugely from practicing enterprise risk management since the global economic crisis in 2008-2009. These institutes understood that enterprise risk management is very essential, and the failure during this 2008-2009 was the inadequacy of integrated risk management. Again, it's obvious that unanticipated global incidences dictate that tomorrow's firms are different from that of the past and today's, so that firms need to make themselves ready enough for issues that would encounter in the future. So the objective of this presentation is to discuss the need for adopting enterprise management in the construction firms. Thereby, it would help them to respond for the diverse and complex risks of the industry. As a significance, it's considered that this would enhance the awareness of the leadership in the construction firms regarding the values of implementing an integrated and holistic enterprise risk management in their firms. Again, it would also provoke construction companies to respond to a growing need for applying enterprise risk management. So, what's really the impact of COVID on the construction companies? To see this, would give some brief information to see the economic impact of COVID. Different reports have been released by international institutes and even regional ones like the World Bank and the IMF. And these are indicating that the global economy would shrink by 5% in 2020 from the baseline one. And this is 3 times as deep as the 2009-2008 global recession. Again, it is also the deepest recession since the World War II. The impact is again very significant on low-income countries in the African continent. So on the low-income countries, due to this would impact the economy to fall to 1.6 from 5.2 in 2019. In the case of the African GDP, it is expected to drop by 1.4 point from 3.2 in 2019. The other important example is the Ethiopian case, where it had been experiencing two-digit economy in the last 17 years, and it is supposed to be reduced to about 3.2% from 9% in 2019. This is really the lowest uh, GDP in the last 17 years. What is the global impact of COVID-19 on the construction companies, particularly? This COVID would have two major impacts. The one is that is related to the safety protocol, and the other is the lockdown and restrictions. This in turn would have their own consequences, and we'll see by each of the factors. But as final consequence, we can say that this COVID would result in disputes and claims between the contracting parties, and even there might be a reduction of demand into construction in the coming few years. For example, if we see particularly the impact of health and safety protocols, obviously construction projects are labor intensive and their consuming labor is covering about 30 to 50% of the total project cost. So if labor is such important, the productivity of labor is very important. It should always be very effective and efficient. So what is the impact of health and safety? As we know, uh, COVID-19 impacted the construction productivity by these four important factors. The one is the frequent absenteeism due to the infection and various impacts of COVID, and the other is extended leave and different employees. We are also urged to maintain some social distancing while construction is managed by integration of different employees. There is also enforcement to increase the number of shifts to reduce the number of employees working in a construction site. The other impact is the supply shock. Uh, Proper or effective and efficient supply management is very important for construction. However, as we know, factors were shut down for a long time, especially on these giant industries like China, America, and Europeans. And there were also disruption of logistics because of the lockdown of borders. And this resulted in the disruption of supplies. The other impact of COVID is in resulting on in impacting the demand of construction in the industry. Investors are encouraged while there is a reasonable market price to build their projects, and there is also confidence for them to sustain their projects. However, COVID has impacted the construction by increasing the price of materials and the price of different equipment, even labor. And there is also a hesitation that the impact of the pandemic would continue for further years. In this case, investors would not have confidence to establish or to initiate their projects. So in this case, there might be a reduction or a cancellation of projects due to the impact of COVID. Last and the important impact of COVID on the construction companies or the construction industry is delay in projects and contractual implications among construction partners. Obviously, COVID, as we said, is an anticipated event, and this has been disrupting several projects in different nations. And the cause of this disruption were not well treated in construction contracts or condition of contract, including the FIDIC condition of contract. Because of this, there might be some misunderstanding or disputes between contractors and consultants, contractors and employees, even financiers. This is unfavorable condition or situation for these parties in their future relations. So, why enterprise risk management is really important? The one factor is the nature of the construction business itself. Construction is a risky business. And again, risks in the constructions are very different in that they are very diverse, they are complex, and even they are dynamics. And if the risk management is inadequate to manage this diverse, complex, and dynamics risks, it would result in severe business damage, bankruptcy, and ultimately business closures. So, why this enterprise risk management is really important? To see this, there are some basic core values and principles for enterprise risk management. The one is enterprise risk management enables to manage risks in a holistic approach. And the other is it would also enable to integrate risks at different units and business operations. This is also important to manage risks in a comprehensive one. That means the other approaches are not comprehensive like the traditional one, which is really considered as silo management or a disintegrated one. But this enterprise risk management would enable to see all risks in a company. This also enables to consolidate all risks in the company. This enterprise risk management enables to coordinate all risks in an efficient way. There are also driving factors and benefits that urge construction companies to implement enterprise risk management. The one is, as that has been experienced in America, there are some legal and regulatory compliance requirements that construction companies need to fulfill. The other and second important thing is in the case that the enterprise management is ineffective or inefficient, there is reduced earnings and volatility. But if it is managed, it would also help to reduce cost of construction and losses in construction projects and the overall construction operations. Enterprise risk management again would enable to improve decisions in the company or project level, even in the industry level. It is also proved that enterprise risk management would increase profitability and earnings of the company, and ultimately it would enhance firm values. The other important factors as enterprise risk management would handle risks in an integrated and holistic approach. It would minimize the use of or the deployment of resources. The final one is since it is very effective and efficient, it would establish good relations between or among parties so that it would enhance the competitive advantage of contractors. If this enterprise risk management has such benefits, there is a concern that enterprise risk management is not well practiced in the sector. So as a status, we can see that there is some improvement in managing or in trying to handle risks in a holistic and integrated approach, but still the construction industry is insufficient and informal in managing their risks. Because of that, uh, frequent failures have been experienced in construction companies. In this regard, it would be helpful to see the difference between the traditional risk management and the enterprise risk management. The traditional risk management is very segmented and conducted in separate business units or departments, and it is blamed that it is silo management within a company level. That means risks might be managed in a single unit or in single operations, but this is not really effective and efficient. But in the case of enterprise risk management, this would help to treat risks as part of the entire organization rather than a discrete risk handling or managing approach. The second important factor is traditional risk management fails to consider interactions between risks. However, enterprise risk management enables to coordinate risks in a holistic approach. Again, traditional risk management results in inefficient coordination between silos, while enterprise risk management would consolidate risks in the company so that all parties or all units, all individuals would involve in managing the risks in an integrated and holistic approach. Again, traditional risk management resulted in duplication of risk management expenditures, but enterprise risk management viewed risks at the various levels from the top to the down. And again, finally, traditional risk management may overlook most significant risks, but enterprise risk management would see every risk at every point of the company. Um, then it's good again to see why enterprise risk management is not well practiced in the company, in construction companies, and in the construction industry as well. Uh, as we have said, enterprise risk management has significant benefits, including in enhancing the firm values, but there is a limitation in adopting in construction firms. So it's important to consider that there is no free lunch in enterprise management. It requires to give sufficient time to enhance the commitment of the leadership and the employees, and even to deploy sufficient resources in implementing enterprise risk management. Firms are also expected to transfer their companies considering the prevailing conditions or situations of the globe. It is also important to see that there might be some regulatory and compliance requirements in the very future because of such unexpected incidents like COVID-19. Maybe to see firms to enable to see why enterprise management is not well practiced in the various companies, even in different industries. It's good to see the important obstacles where literatures are identifying as critical ones. The first and the important barrier for firms not to implement enterprise risk management is lack of awareness on the values of enterprise risk management. And second one is lack of internal competency, including knowledge, skill, and experience in their employees. There is also the problem in having quality data and to access the need uh, to the level we need. Again, some firms might not assign sufficient resources as well because of the misunderstanding. There is also a problem in having common risk language on enterprise risk management. Fifth factor is lack of qualified personnel to implement enterprise risk management because it is very new discipline in the sector. And again, there is inadequate training on enterprise risk management and in the risk management in general. Lack of support from top management is again the common obstacle in most of the nations. The priority of the management again might not be on handling risks. It might be focusing on the other strategic issues, while enterprise risk management is very important. Human and organizational resistance is also raised as one of the factors in deterring the implementation of this ARM. The difficulty in quantifying the risk is again another important factor that hinder in implementing risk management. Unavailability of risk management consultant is also another factor. So as a conclusion, the construction industry is prone for diverse, complex, and dynamic risks, which we can also consider as an anticipated risk, like the occurrence of COVID pandemic was not considered by most of the contractors in the globe, while its impact is very significant. This study recommends construction firms to introduce and implement integrated and holistic enterprise risk management. This is my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for a wonderful presentation, Worku. Our attendee, do you have any question? Raise your hand or unmute yourself. I first ask a question. Worku, what do you think during the COVID-19 status, how do the enterprise can gradually recover their manufacture or production under the condition of under the risk of the COVID-19, and how to reduce the risk as more as possible? What is your comments? Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. As I try to explain, risk management is not well practiced in the construction companies. That's really the problem. That's why this presentation is just presented as part of my study, because I have a concern. Most of our contractors, especially in Ethiopia or in developing nations, are not ready enough to handle such risks. So my hesitation is that since most of the companies are not ready enough to handle their risks, the impact would be very significant. But for this time, as the FIDE Control Contract is recommending in its recent publications, it's good for the contractor and the employer or the clients to sit and negotiate on the impact of COVID and to handle the case mutually. Again, since We are not sure that COVID would be eradicated from our globe. They should establish a proper risk management system in their firm. Maybe as a solution or as a remedy for contractors, there are some provisions that may help them to recover their damage, like the force majeure events. This in the COVID-19 is obviously force majeure for most of the contractors, so they should substantiate and submit their claim to employers. But employers should also understand the burden of contractors in this regard. Otherwise, if there is no mutual understanding, our contractors will be falling in severe damage to the level of, bankruptcy of their companies. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Worku. We receive a new question from Ferrona. I unmute you. You can directly talk to our speaker. Hello, Augustine.
Okay, thank you very much, Worku, for that presentation. My question has to do with some of the consequences of COVID-19 and the restriction of movements that you showed in your chart. And I was trying to ask if the restriction on international movements has affected the exchange of expertise in some countries more than others with regards to uh, construction industries.
Yeah, an important question. It's really very significant developing nations. For example, in Ethiopia, most of our contractors are from Chinese. So because of the lockdown of borders, it was difficult to get expatriate staffs. And this is really very significant impact for the construction industry in Ethiopia and even in African nations.
And like a follow-up to that is like a question I'm gonna try to ask, because the model of the risk management, you're trying to look at the traditional and look at this new model you are actually advocating for. Does that actually suggest solution to such kind of consequence that might be they may be facing in those countries you have mentioned, as you make mention of Ethiopia and the expatriates from China unable to cross? So how does the model actually uh, comes into play, and also with regards to risk management? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, again, you see, in the traditional risk management, we're just managing on very few risks that we see. But in the case of enterprise risk management, that is a holistic one, from the beginning, from the identification of risks, there is the effort to exhaust the number of risks. See, they were to see out of the box what would be the probability of some event, risk event, what would be its impact, even it would see the historical background of risks. As we have said, this is the pandemic, the COVID pandemic is only a risk event in the last 115 years. Yeah, if we follow the traditional risk approach, we will not have the historical issues to identify or the risks that would happen even in the future. But in the case of enterprise risk management, we will have even the compiled recorded risks. This would help contractors to see all the risks in the last some few or even more years. But the traditional one, it is not well established, it is not well framed, there is no even a risk management process. In the enterprise risk management process, we'll start from identification of risk. We'll assess, we'll prioritize all the risks from the low risk to the high risk, and we'll also set some risk mitigation measures. But in the case of these traditional ones, we'll only focus what we see today. So there is a limitation of exhausting risks in the case of this silo management approach. So if we try to manage enterprise risk management, it would help us to exhaustively identify all the risks and to again assess the impact of each of the risks, and finally to establish a proper mitigation measure for each of the risks again.
Okay, thank you for answer. I think we received we can answer one more question. It is from Dave Oven. Dave, I did, okay, I already unmute you. You can direct talk to our speaker.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, what was some of the most important things construction companies did once they realized, because COVID was so unexpected, what were some of the good things they did in response that set some companies apart from others in terms of risk management and moving forward with COVID?
Sorry, can you repeat? Yeah, sorry, I couldn't catch it.
Were there some things that construction companies did in response to COVID that were actually very useful in terms of limiting the impact or the risks on the construction industry?
If I understood you, you see, this enterprise risk management, as I said, is well practiced in financial institutes and they have been benefiting. Again, the construction industry is prone for diverse, complex, and dynamic risks, but there is a limitation in managing the risks. But if we see some literatures, they are proposing that the construction industry is becoming a candidate to implement risk management because of the nature of risks in the industry. So, despite we are not to the level that we have a matured enterprise risk management, if we start from now, this would help contractors to mitigate or to handle events like COVID even in the future. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's quite interesting.